podcast.
Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Chris Dalzell as he walked through Shoreline Construction. Well, today, it's his partner, Justin Harvey, or maybe Chris is Justin's partner, however they look at it, and Justin operates PremierExteriorsLLC.com. You're really going to enjoy just the methodical nature that Justin walks through as he thinks and reflects back on his time leading Premier Exteriors. He gives you a background before Premier. He gives you kind of his life with Premier, and now the next mountain they're about to climb. You're going to get a lot of wisdom from this conversation with Justin Harvey. Go to mybusinessonpurpose.com. We are answering some of your most challenging questions right on our homepage, mybusinessonpurpose.com, and I hope you enjoy this powerful interview with my friend Justin Harvey of Premier Exteriors. All right, so here with my buddy Justin Harvey, we've had the privilege of being able to kind of be in the arena, in the trenches here for the last, 5-6 years, somewhere in that range, as we've been able to just watch Premier do some really, really incredible and awesome things. And Justin, we've had a chance to talk a couple of weeks ago with Chris, your business partner, and so we got the Shoreline side of things. Whereas Chris runs pretty much day-to-day operations for Shoreline. You run the day-to-day operations for Premier Exteriors. And so we'll dive into Premier a little bit, but I want you to take us back and the Justin Harvey before Premier. Who was Justin? And so just give us a little glimpse of Justin, a little bit of growing up, but then diving into, kind of the early 2000s and where you're at there. Give us some background.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Scott. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. Fortunately enough, my parents sacrificed and sent my brother and I to private schools, Savannah Christian, and then Benedictine, which is BC for high school. Then went to Georgia Southern in Statesboro, Georgia, where Chris and I met. And then after college, I went to Colorado for a year and worked and snow skied out there and just had fun for a year before I came back to Savannah and started working. My first job when I got back from Colorado was at South Carolina State Plastering, which was a stucco company that was doing all the stucco on the homes in Sun City for Pulte. And they're also doing work for Syntex Homes in the Bluffton area. I had interviewed with them actually on the phone, via phone at first, on the chairlift when I was in Colorado, and then in person when I got back. But started with South Carolina State Plastering, worked there for 3 years. It was a great company. Learned a lot there. Got a fast tracked in information and knowledge very quickly. Was very well rounded. Held many positions from a punch guy where I started out to end up being an estimator / office manager, and held positions in between that in the field. It's lath superintendent, brick superintendent, stucco superintendent. So I learned the business really quick and was just eager to learn it and wanted to take on as much responsibility as I could, and as much as the ownership and upper management would give me. And things were just right at the time to where they gave me a lot of responsibility. And in 2008, when the market started to slow down tremendously, is when I left the company and went out and started Premier Exteriors.
Justin, what was the actually, let me ask you two questions. I want to go back to one of the things, the guys, you said they gave you a lot of responsibility while you were there. You own a company now, and so you've got young guys and young ladies that you bring in to the company. What are some of the things that you learned from there that you try to make sure that you've really entrenched into the onboarding process, into bringing some of these younger talents into the company because it was invested in you?
Learning and working somewhere else, you learn things you do want to do from that company, and you also learn things you don't want to do. I don't know if it was intentional by upper management at South Carolina State Plastering, but they were very willing to give me the responsibility I asked for. And so one thing that we really try to implement now in the interview process It's really understand what that person's capabilities are and what their future goals are. How much responsibility do they have? What are their career goals? What are their personal goals? And then we try to understand that there's a place here for them, and we can offer that level of responsibility to them. Because if it's a win-win the way I see it. If that person is willing to take on more responsibility, willing to go to the next level, then it's a win for that person individually, and it's a win for the company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So go back 2008. You said you left the company. What was it? Was there a catalyst? Was there something that you either drawn to or being pushed? What was the transition catalyst there?
I think it was drawn to more than anything. Where I was currently employed, they didn't have any interest, so to speak, of really going outside of the residential market. They had been highly successful at that for many years. They had multiple branches from Las Vegas all the way out to South Carolina, and but they really didn't want to diversify to go to these other opportunities. And I felt like it was a missed opportunity, and they weren't very welcoming to the idea of me doing that, chasing these commercial leads, which they finally gave in a little bit, and I landed a couple commercial jobs before I left. But I really felt like they were the only professional stucco company in the area, highly professional, and I felt like there was a lot of work they were not going after. And so I felt like ultimately that I could do it better, and I felt like there was a gap there that I could fill. And so that's what drove me to go out on my own and start Premier Exteriors.
Yeah. So, okay. So you start there, and you guys are in the midst of this economic recession that's going on, pretty stout during that time. Take us back to the early days as you got started. Obviously, you've given us some background into why you started Premier in the first place, but give us some more details on the startup of Premier and how things looked when you started.
I was 27 years old. I was single, was not married, had no kids, and so it didn't take a lot for me to live, and the risk was not as great as if I were to do that now. I didn't have near as much to lose. So early on, had formed some good relationships during my time at South Carolina State Plastering, and a lot of those relationships carried over when I went out on my own, getting contacted by people. One of them was Jeff Waddle at David Weekly Homes. He called me once he heard I was leaving and said, "Hey, you're the only person I've ever dealt with. I'd like you to do our business and continue to do business, but through you." And that was a huge win. That's a national builder, privately owned. I think the largest owned private builder in the United States. So getting that call was a big relief. And we just turned over every rock we could. We did everything we could, and we're just really hungry and really aggressive, and really had the mindset of failure wasn't an option. So, and I was able to work relentlessly and work to make sure that we were successful getting started.
So you get started and you've got this mindset, you kind of eat what you kill, and you're moving as hard and as fast as you can. We found that a lot of business owners, when they get started, they get a couple of those early wins, and it's exciting. And there's days where you kind of have just a moment of like, okay, I think we're going to make it. And yet at the same time, and you even have friends that look around you and you're like, oh my gosh, Justin, you're killing it. You guys are just, y'all are killing it. And then you've got those days you look up and you go, I kind of feel like it's killing us a little bit. What did chaos look like for you guys early on? Because there's a lot of business owners that feel like they're in chaos. The startup phase, there's a lot of that going on as we're just trying to figure out how to get the business off the ground in the first place. What were some of those chaotic elements within the business in 08, 09, 2010 in those early days?
Man, it was cash flow was a big one. Starting with very, very little resources, cash flow was a big one. They teach you about cash flow in college, but it's just on text. It's not, it's a different ballgame when you live it. So just running and gunning with, like you said, Scott, was just as much as we could handle, as much as we could turn around, committing to everything, over promising, and having to over deliver with an over promise. just creates a lot of work, a lot of stress, getting pulled in a lot of different directions, working late into the night, working weekends. So it was a lot of chaotic or early times, trying to manage when we did hire a couple people, had no experience in managing. And that's one thing I've learned over the years is you might be really good and people are really, really good at the technical part. And we were really good at the technical part. We could install, we could get the work, we could install properly, service the customer properly, get good feedback. But just because you're good at those things doesn't mean you're not going to be naturally good at managing people. So that was a big learning curve. And being that young and not having thorough training, just a lot of trial by fire and trial by error. But it was awesome to have the opportunity to do it. So, and I'm very, very grateful and appreciative of that.
Justin, there's a lot of businesses, particularly in the construction space, that you mentioned cash flow, and you'll hear a company and you say, how big's your company? And they'll say, we did $10 million last year. Without knowing, you'll look at it and go, oh my gosh, you guys, again, you're killing it. You're crushing it. And the reality is that you live on pennies of those $10 million as to what actually kind of is the residual that's remaining once that 10 million is evaporated to vendors and payroll and a variety of other things. How did you wrap your hands? So like you mentioned, you had kind of your hands wrapped around the operational process, the sales, I'll call the marketing process. You knew who to go to get bids, and you guys are even actually going back through that right now as you're getting more involved in residential and thinking through the marketing process. But it was really that administrative function. So in that year 2, 3, 4, and 5, what sort of things did you start to do in the administrative space, the accounting particularly space, job costing, thinking through cash flow and those sorts of things, that you really started to, where you could kind of show up and you and Chris could talk about the business and you'd say, no, I know my numbers. What are some of those elements that you had to put in place to, quote, know your numbers?
So the primary one was job costing. So I would job cost every job, throughout the job and at the end of the job. I think that's a big mistake people make, is they wait to the end of the job to see if they made money, or see if they were profitable. And one thing we would do is just constantly job cost, making sure within budget. That way, if we weren't, we could tweak something or make changes where that was an option.
Justin, real quick, for those who aren't in construction, explain what's the purpose of job costing?
The ultimate purpose is just to make sure you're staying within your budget, but we break it down very detailed. So we have multiple different payouts in our labor budget, for example, and so we just don't look at the lump sum $5,000 payout or $50,000 payout. We're checking it every day and every week. We're monitoring how much work was done, and if it's in line with how much we're billing for. If it's in line with what we're paying out per unit, and not overpaying the material or the labor budget, because that's where I think a lot of people get in trouble. They bid a job, they set a budget, and they just pay, and at the end they look at the job costing report and say, just to see if they were overpaid or they underpaid on their labor budget. And so we tried to stay on top of that consistently to understand that we were in the black, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's got application not just to construction. That's got application to somebody who owns an ice cream shop, or they sell cars, or whatever. In knowing, you mentioned the word unit, and understanding the profitability of those units and really starting to think through that. You can start through that with a simple spreadsheet, even just looking through spreadsheets. In fact, you guys, before you went to Smart Sheets, you guys were doing that on a basic spreadsheet for years, weren't you?
Yeah, for years. Absolutely. That's the way we train our guys is everybody has to learn how to job cost the old way. I don't know if it's a waste of time now or not, but I don't think it is. But job cost the old way with a pencil and a straight edge, and it really just ties you to the job and ties you to the budget and helps you understand. It becomes more tangible when you do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you start to get your hands around some of those early things. It takes you, and I love when we have conversations like this, especially when you hear them on podcasts. You're like, all right, year 3, 4, 5, like it went by in a blink of an eye. Those were long days. They were
Long
long
days.
weeks. They were
Yeah.
long months. How did you stay engaged through that and not just go, you know what, let me go back to another company where I can just kind of get a paycheck?
It felt a lot. We, like I said, we talked about job costing. I would job cost jobs, and I'd say, man, we're profitable. We're profitable. And I look in the bank account, and there's no money in there. I'm like, where's the money? And then you look at your receivables, and so you can do the math, quick math, and understand that, all right, it's tied up in receivables, it's tied up in payables, and there's a little bit in the bank account. And so, building cash flow and building cash in the company was very hard to do, and it takes a long time to do it. But the comfort level, once you get that there and the cash is there, it allows you to focus on other things in the business that are important. That way you're not stressed about making a bank payment, or how are you going to make payroll, or how are you going to pay the supplier who's not going to put your credit on hold. So once we got that established, it allowed us to focus on growing the business. And we were very frugal as well. We still are. We purchase used vehicles. We'll purchase used equipment when we can, just to help conserve the cash.
Justin, there's a lot of talk at the time of this recording. We're in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're about 3 or 4 months removed from significant cash being outlaid to the federal government, to small businesses and that sort of thing. And even still, the bankruptcy rate continues to climb for companies who didn't have cash. In fact, I just read an article recently about how the amount of money being borrowed right now is at an all-time high as well, in terms of just raw dollars. You, about 5.5 years ago, decided to boldly situate on a core value called fiscal responsibility as defined by no debt. And so here you guys are, you're a growing company, and you guys have decided and made a decision to not take any debt. How has that helped you, but also how's it maybe stunted you in the past?
It's definitely helped in the sense that it's not a stress that we have to worry about. As business owners and business leaders know, there's lots of stress every day, whether it's personnel issues or customer issues, whatever the case may be. So when you add a financial piece into it, it just makes it that much harder. And so I felt like getting that off my plate allowed us to focus and grow the business organically as we have, and allow us just to be comfortable in our cash position, and not have to lay anybody off because of cash issues or anything like that. Maybe how it's hurt us, Scott, is it kept us maybe from being a little bit more aggressive. We could have borrowed money to go start up new locations, new branches, and not have to spend our own working capital. But that was just a choice we made to grow organically up to this point, to where we are now over the 12 years, and promote from within, get somebody to move to a different location, as we did in Charleston and Myrtle Beach. So we probably could have grown faster had we used lines of credit and bank loans, but that's just it was just a choice that we made to not do that.
Yeah. And I want to be very clear. You guys are not a small business in terms of 6 figures or even 7 figures. And so when you make a decision to go no debt, it's a significant decision. So in the first 5, 6, 7 years, you're running your business, things are going along. And then you guys decide and make a decision to start to really systematize the business for a variety of reasons. So I guess the question is, why did you begin to systematically start owning the business through systems and processes, and how did you do that?
Well, I remember Chris and I talking one day, and I was like, I told him, I said, Chris, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know where we go next. Like, I think we've reached our our capacity of what we know. It's time to seek out some help. And so we started talking around, and we did strategic coach in Chicago for a year. And then after we finished that, we signed up with you. I think you had just started your business. I think we were one of your first customers.
Mm-hmm.
And you really, really helped us build out processes and build out procedures for the company, which made sense. We just didn't know any better to start that. But it allowed us, and your whole point behind it was, as you hire, as you grow, you have everything processed out. And so you just can, if somebody leaves or whatever happens, you have the process written out, and it's easier transfer. You're not having to completely retrain a new person from scratch, because everything is on paper. So that just makes it's another benefit similar to the being a debt-free company. We get the processes built out, which is a lot of work. It's not easy by any means, but it allows us to focus on other things. It's like we got it done. We can, I don't want to say put it behind us, but we can move on to the next item.
So you had I think I remember the story, as a card table, basically, that you guys worked from. And now you're at a point, why don't you give us a snapshot of where Premier is today?
We started and ran out of my upstairs house, or upstairs of my house. In the bonus room, it was me and Chris and David up there, and Daniel, and so now we have an office here in Bluffton, and in Charleston, and in Myrtle Beach, and I think we are somewhere around 26 salaried employees, and on the subcontractor base, we're probably 150 to 200 on the subcontractor base, and looking to continue to grow. I feel like over the past 3 or 4 hires we've made, 5 hires we've made, we've really got the hiring thing down. We've hired some really, really good people, and really starting to see that to come to fruition and creating some new opportunities for us.
It's been interesting to watch, because you guys do disc profiles on just about everybody that you look to hire. Not everybody you hire, but you look into their personalities. It's been really interesting to see how you guys have started to even zero in on personalities with some rare personality keywords, just because you have gotten so good at that. And so it's even neat to see that streamlined. So based on where you're at now, Justin, what's the next mountain that you guys feel like it's time to climb?
Well, we're looking in 2 directions now. One is remodel and repair on the exterior. We've always been a business-to-business company, and this is a business-to-consumer avenue. The R&R work is, and so we feel like there's a really good opportunity here in Hilton Head area, and also in Charleston. So we're in the process of getting that up and going, and it's been enjoyable getting a new branch of this business going with a lot more experience and a lot more expertise and a lot more financing than we once had. So that's been enjoyable to really build a team around it and not have the early years stress of no work little work and very little financing. And the other one is we're looking at different areas to maybe acquire a small company, and looking for in an area that's an emerging market, maybe not something that's already flooded with competitors. But so those are the two things we're looking at right now.
Justin, I want to ask you, because you're in a unique situation. You've made a very intentional move here over the last 3 or 4 years, and I usually ask questions towards the end about just a piece of wisdom. But I'm going to ask you this in 2 parts. The first part, I'm going to ask you for a piece of wisdom from a leadership perspective, because you've made an intentional decision. Not that you're not involved in the day-to-day of the company, but you've taken a couple of talented team members and basically said, hey, you own this section of the business. you own this section of the business, and you've started to run into what we call stage 4 leadership, to where you've actually got some executive leaders in place who are running different elements of the company. There are a lot of people who would love to get there because they realize that there's good scale, and also just the value it brings to those people to help raise them up and build them up. What's a piece of wisdom you have in terms of delegating your leadership to what we would call kind of executive leadership, where you actually have people leading different segments of the business?
Delegating is probably one of the most talked about pieces of advice or things that business owners and business leaders should do is delegate, delegate, delegate. You hear it all the time. And in the big picture is true. It's 100% true. In reality, it's very, very hard to do for somebody like me. And I think it is for a lot of business owners. And there's got to be a substantial effort to really delegate. And you have to help the person you're delegating to, because they in turn have to learn how to delegate. And they have to make sure they have somebody they can delegate to. So the level of importance of it is huge. If you want to grow, if you want to scale, you have to delegate, and you have to trust and be okay with the decisions the people that you're delegating to make. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like I said earlier, it's easier said than done. It's very, very difficult. It was for me. It took me years, and I'm still working on it, on delegating and releasing. But I'm really seeing this come to fruition and allowing me to work on getting the R&R business going, allowing me to work on the bigger picture, maybe us acquiring a company somewhere. If I wasn't delegating and still in the weeds, I wouldn't have time to do that. So
yeah,
all the things we read, all the things that we're taught and coached upon is delegate. So you as the owner, as the president, can lead with a vision and make these things happen. And you have to delegate for that to happen. And so it's really coming in the last year for me. It's really starting to come to fruition.
You've spent a lot of time in personal growth and development, trying to grow yourself as a leader, trying to grow yourself as a husband, as a dad, as a person. I know this is a really broad question, but over the last few years, is there kind of a nugget of wisdom, a piece of wisdom that you've gained that you just realize either in your mind or out of your mouth, it's just coming on a regular basis that this is the thing that I'm trying to live by?
Yeah, my biggest one would be, excuse me, Scott, it's servant leadership. I really, really, bought into that after reading about it. And I felt like early on in my career, I was doing that, but unaware of it. And it became more apparent as I learned about it, and be a leader that serves my team, serves my family, and ultimately serves God. But excuse me, servant leadership is huge because it allows you to be humble, grounded, and allows your team members and your family know that your interest is for their success. And it takes the selfishness out of it, because if your team's successful, if you're, in my case, subcontractors are successful, then ultimately me as a business is going to be successful. And so it comes by default. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Push servant leadership, serve others, help others get what they want, and you'll get what you want in return.
It's good wisdom. Man, thank you, Justin. And you've just done incredible work. It's been so much fun to watch the journey so far, and to even see what you've got coming up here in the next few months and years. So, hey, tell everybody where they can find you, can find Premier, so that if they're curious as they're listening to this, they can start to stalk you online.
So website's premierexteriorsllc.com. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and on Instagram, under all those, and doing a lot more posts, jobs and updates than we have in the past. So, and we're also in the process of building a website for the R&R work as well.
That's great. All right, so go check them out there, premierexteriorsllc.com. And Justin's on LinkedIn and there are a variety of other places. You can see some of their work and to see how they're living out their mission, living out their values, and blowing past their vision. They've already had to rewrite that a couple of times as well, which has been a lot of fun. So Justin, thanks for joining me, man. It's great to get your story recorded.
Absolutely, Scott. Thanks for having me.